with Fresh Pretty Cure, we're hitting the point where I think these seasons or movies or both are going to start getting jumbled in my brain because of the rate and time at which I've been watching them. A lot of these seasons I've been able to watch while I'm doing stuff at work, which, while fun for me at the time, may not end up making for as good a time thinking about them after the fact and reviewing them. The movies less so than the actual seasons themselves, but um, I guess I can always go back and rewatch episodes as needed if I find that I'm not remembering them come time to actually think about talking about the show. But with that out of the way, I am on Fresh Pretty Cure now with these silly little discussions. And Fresh Pretty Cure kind of exists in a weird space in my brain between the older Pretty Cures and the newer ones. It feels much more like the. I hesitate to say modern Pretty Cure considering it's from 2009, but it's it's a little bit closer to those, I guess, in its format and design than it is to the older ones. I put here when I originally wrote down stuff about Fresh Pretty Cure that I needed to keep up with the document a little bit better because I was kind of falling into a bit of an odd place when writing down anything about them. From Fresh Pretty Cure on, I only get a couple of episodes to form an opinion on the show and the characters before moving on to an All Stars crossover movie. On top of that, they get a solo movie later on before the season is done, typically in the late 30s, sometimes mid 30s, but usually somewhere in the 35 to 40 episode range is when they get a solo season movie. This isn't necessarily a problem, but something that's going to impact kind of my view of the season in smaller ways, probably. I am trying my best to keep the opinion of the seasons separate from the opinions of the movies because I do think those are going to vary a little bit. But as a whole, I thoroughly enjoyed Fresh Pretty Cure. I think it was probably, so far, the easiest season to start out of all of the previous seasons. And initially, I said save Futariwa or Max Heart. And thinking about that now, I even disagree with that because I watched a couple of episodes of it and then stopped. And then of the first two seasons, I should say. And then would watch a couple of more episodes and then stop. And it took a while to hit a stride with those couple of seasons. And then, even then, between them, I did not watch a whole lot of Pretty Cure. I would watch it and then stop for maybe several months before getting back to it to pick up the next season. And that might have been a maybe a healthier way to watch it than what I've started doing and what I have continued to do from fresh on. Although I have slowed my roll on those a little bit. Even Yes, Pretty Cure 5 Go Go gave me a little bit of trouble in the very beginning, as I, like previous seasons, put it down and had to pick it back up a pretty good amount of time later, despite the improvements to it from its first season. But this was not the case for Fresh Pretty Cure, despite it being a fresh cast. See what I did there? Ha ha! I'm so funny. But I did really like how easy this season was to get into, especially compared to my experience starting the previous seasons. I struggled a little bit with each of them, not because I didn't like what I was watching, but just something about it made it a little bit difficult. Perhaps it's not the kind of show I was used to when I was starting it. And by the time I hit Fresh Pretty Cure, I was already 4 seasons and a couple of movies deep, And so at that point, my brain was kind of like, nah, yeah, this is just kind of what it's like now. But whatever the case may be, Fresh did a really good job of drawing me in pretty much immediately and making me want to continue on with the show right away, um, which was really good for the season. Like I think that shows a lot about the quality of the season when just off the rip, it's like, yeah, I'll keep watching this. I'm excited to see where this is going. I'm enjoying the characters. I'm enjoying my funny new friends and their talking cat slash ferret slash not a ferret, a cute fairy. But it's really interesting to see how the franchise evolves with each iteration. And Fresh feels like, kind of like what I was talking about a little bit earlier, a bridge between the pre and post 2010s PreCure. Uh, it's it's interesting looking at it from where I currently am now in 2024, having started watching this series from the beginning and then seeing maybe not even clips, but maybe just the box art of some of the seasons from deeper in and how it changes over time. And then we have Fresh here, which I do feel kind of exists in the middle of the, like I said, the pre and post 2010s PreCure. For one, this season starts the trend of the characters' hair colors changing when they transform, rather than just the hairstyle. Some of the seasons, yes, Pretty Cure 5, a little bit did this, but for the most part, it was very minor changes to their hair tone. The intensity of the color might shift a little bit as they transform and become their Pretty Cure forms, but the main color kind of just stays the same for the most part. But in this one, their hair colors change entirely with their magical girl transformations. And we get our first of the blonde lead Pretty Cures. I feel like just looking at the box art of several of the seasons, I feel like maybe it's not standard, but it is pretty common that our pink Pretty Cure is also a blonde woman. Um, it's also the first season to use the CG ending themes. From here on, and at least every season I've watched so far, I believe it continues on past this. The ending themes have CG dance routines of the characters doing choreographed dances with CG models, and this one is the first one to start that trend. They kind of had little dance routines previously, but it was still the 2D animated. But this one is them in their Pretty Cure forms doing fun dance routine or whatever, and they were fun. I really liked the dance routines. The ones for the season are really fun, and uh, it was especially silly having the songs in fiction reference Pretty Cure, because in the show itself, uh, our good Pretty Cure friends are a dance group by I mean pretty early on in the show, but mainly by the end point are they like a solid unit of dancers, which is kind of funny, showing I guess the era that the show was made in, where it is a viable career for them to be just a dance group who dance to songs, rather than how it feels now, where you would have to be the dancer and a singer or a songwriter or performers outside of just dance routines. I don't know if just being the dancer in something like that and being in a leading, maybe even famous role like that is obtainable. I don't know. Different era, maybe, or I'm overthinking it. Both are possible, but they are dancers in the show, and the song that they play in the ending theme is a song that plays in the show. a lot as they are trying to practice their dance routines or entering competitions because that's the main song they practice their dance to. And I don't remember off the top of my head if it's addressed that the song references the Pretty Cure. And I guess for quite a bit of the show, the world outside of the Pretty Cure don't reference the Pretty Cure. But this one is probably the first season to kind of, I guess, put a lot of focus on the fact that the bad guy attacks from Labyrinth are happening in the real world to people who aren't magical girls and affecting them. And they sometimes seem to remember that these things are happening. Not a lot, um, but it is kind of funny that I feel like more than most seasons, Labyrinth starts off with a very cool, uh, I hesitate to say, terrorist attack or like domestic act of terrorism on a concert. Um, and they just kind of go from there. In previous seasons, it felt a little more cartoony, and despite the fact that they do turn a speaker into a big Gen 1 Transformers looking ass robot to attack this little dance venue show, they are assaulting a lot of people with sonic waves and then terrorizing them off the rip. I don't know. It's just a little funny to me. It's not bad, but it is amusing. But I think this season did a lot of interesting things with its story, aside from that TM. I felt like there was a lot less focus on the toys this season that the Cures use, despite there being a pretty equivalent amount to previous seasons so far, maybe even a couple more. Just something about the way they handled the toys was less, look at these cool things, you want to buy them, right? And it was more, yeah, these are items that we would have or would need or would get access to as part of the natural progression of the story. And I think that made it, that element, a lot more palatable and a more naturally included element of the show. It felt very in universe anytime some new toy showed up. I kind of liked that Chiffon operated as both a character and a plot device, especially in the later parts of the show. But I do, however, think that it could have used a little bit more mixing up than every episode being literally the same setup. Spoilers if you haven't watched the 2009 Fresh Pretty Cure of Chiffon being Infinity and Infinity appearing after a certain point, literally every episode, and just kind of the magical girls having to deal with that literally every time. I liked the stress that it placed on them because they knew they had a timer pretty much. They knew that Chiffon is going to continue to turn into infinity while we try to take care of him. We don't know when it's going to happen, and we don't know where it's going to happen, but it will continue to happen, so we need to be ready. They weren't always so good at being ready for that to happen, but that's fine. That's not a bad thing by the show's like running, at least. It's just something that happens to them, which is fine. The show is allowed to do that and have it just be part of the story and not a mark against its otherwise flawless reputation. But it did get a little repetitive at times, just doing the exact same thing every time, and them always being surprised by the fact that Chiffon is turning into infinity, even though we've been told on multiple occasions, yeah, this is going to continue to happen. We know this, and then we still forget it. But that's fine. It was okay. I liked that Chiffon was infinity and was used beyond just being a magic baby, which I guess I guess this season isn't even really like the first one to do the magic baby because Porun is right there. But this is the first one to look like a magic baby and more than looking like a mascot. And speaking of things that the show kind of does repetitively, even in previous seasons, the even though most episodes had kind of the same beats of the Pretty Cure getting beaten up and then standing back up and then winning, the last arc was a nice mix up with them actually losing Chiffon for a little while and needing to go to where the antagonists were to take her back. I uh, over a couple of the seasons, it seems like they like to do something where they introduce the main antagonist, and then at some point, kind of in the middle of the show, they like to put the Pretty Cures at the bad guys' headquarters or base or world or whatever it may be for that given season. They like to throw them into the deep end there and say, okay, girls, this is what you're dealing with right now. This is what you're going to be dealing with until you beat whatever the main bad guy is. Figure out how to survive for now because you aren't strong enough to win yet. And I do like that about the show. I do like that it has at least a moment of them knowing very clearly what they are up against, what they are dealing with, which I think then pays off at the end when they get a couple of episodes back to back to back of dealing with the main antagonist's organization or just the final boss of it himself, rather than continuing on the episodic nature of it. And the previous seasons have had their final episodes be back to back, but two or three of the episodes it feels at max. Fresh had what felt like a lot longer of a season finale going on during it. They were in Labyrinth for quite a while, it felt like, as I was watching it, or at least as I look back on my time watching it now. But not long in a bad way, long in a I was really interested in seeing what was going on in this very clearly messed up world that is trying to invade and I guess does succeed in invading their world. And so it was really cool getting those episodes where it is not non-stop fighting, but they do fight quite a bit in those last couple of episodes. We get a lot of shonen battle going on, and I thought it was really fun for that. I like the antagonists in the show. I thought they were kind of fun. All of them being named after cardinal directions was very goofy. They had very goofy names, but that's fine because it's just a silly show in general, and I think that plays well with it. They had their theme and they rolled with it. And with themes, this season is playing fast and loose with the cures more than the antagonists, even. All of their names are vaguely food based. I want to say berry based, but that doesn't even sound right because our lead is Cure Peach, and then it's Cure Berry, Cure Pine, and Cure Passion. So I guess they're fruits, but also I don't really think we could count pine as a fruit, right? Maybe, maybe not. I certainly wouldn't. But maybe I need to look at what the definition of a fruit is and see if pine counts as a fruit. Uh, but I don't know. I thought it was fine. I liked it. I did very pretty much immediately predict that Passion was going to join them. I made a little bit of a prediction right at the start. I kind of wish I did this for more seasons as I was going through it, that Passion was going to join them as the only female antagonist that we had this season, and one who shared a design that was not identical to, but pretty similar to the rest of the girls. And the fact that all of the antagonists were very, they're always human. They're always human until they transform, and even these guys, they didn't transform, which was fine. I mean, I guess deep into it, they kind of did, once our more powerful antagonists showed up. But that's that was way later in the show. Right off the rip, they are just causing monsters to attack. But I pretty much immediately called that she was going to join them. They only had three cures, and they had a four-leaf clover motif going on, and they needed another color also. So, I mean, it doesn't take a genius to figure something like that out, though. But I was pretty happy with myself for immediately calling that. My other called shot did not quite work out as well. Knowing that one of the antagonists was going to immediately leave them in favor of joining the protagonist's side, I thought that the boyfriend of Cure Berry was going to join the antagonist side, or was going to have been one from the start. Miki, I thought her boyfriend was going to turn out to be one of the antagonists. However, very quickly it became apparent, as the show explicitly told us, that Miki's boyfriend isn't even Miki's boyfriend. He's her brother. Which then raised the question in my head, why has no one bothered to ask her that? They spend a lot of time being like, oh, is that Miki's boyfriend? He's so handsome. What's she doing hanging out with that guy? But even her friends she's been friends with for what made it seem like years don't know that she has a brother whom she regularly sees. Like, I get that their parents are turbo divorced, which I thought was really kind of funny the way that they presented that. It was, I mean, a very straightforward and a very natural way to address the fact that their parents were not together anymore, and as a result, they didn't really live together, which is why they hung out outside of the home a lot, why they went to restaurants and stuff to hang out and catch up, which was really nice. I really liked that element of their relationship and its depiction in the show. But it just was weird that her friends didn't say anything to her at any point until, I guess, later on. I don't know. I get that it was a plot device that episode to spurn her on into becoming a pretty cure, because that was her episode to get her pretty cure transformation. As the protagonist's best friend, you were legally required to get a transformation in episode 2. But I don't know. They could have asked her at some point, being like, hey, do you have any other family? You don't exactly talk about your dad a lot. It's like, well, you see, and then that would have been the end of it. But then it couldn't be explained to the viewer, as if the characters didn't know. Wah, wah. But I didn't think it was that bad. It wasn't that terrible. And I liked the whole family dynamic that Pine had going on with her veterinarian parents, and when she and Tart switched bodies, and they didn't know what to do when she became a quote quote ferret suddenly, and took her to the vet. That was comedy. The fact that she still did the magical girl transformation was comedy. It was good. It was just, that episode in particular was just kind of a fun one. This season had several fun episodes, and it got, every now and then, Pretty Cure will get very deep and very emotional, and it does that. I don't want to say with shocking regularity, because that's just kind of what the show sets itself up to do. But I was very impressed with how Fresh went about its emotional journey for the characters, because they do address the fact that Setsuna Cure Passion is basically still just a child who is living by herself in the series. Once she leaves the bad guy organization, she is by herself until she comes to live with Love, Cure Peach. And I think the way that they go about doing that is really interesting. Like, of course, Love and Setsuna are very close friends. They've been through a lot together, a lot of emotionally charged conversations. And by conversation, I mean they are punching each other with magic and fists and yelling about how their heart feels when they think about one another type stuff. Which was also such a good episode. The episode where Passion joins them was so fun. I liked that one a lot. And I really liked that this season takes the antagonist joining the good guys trope and does something really fun with it. But they have Love talk to her parents, and she's like, "Hey, my friend doesn't have anywhere to stay. Can she stay with us?" And her parents treat it very seriously because it is their teenage daughter saying, "Hey, my friend who is my age doesn't have a home to go to. Can she stay with us, pretty please?" And understandably, Love's parents go, "Damn, that's kind of crazy." But they do accept that, and they do accept Setsuna into their family, and I like that it becomes a point of tension for Setsuna as she feels like she wants to belong here in this new home, but also like she doesn't deserve to belong to this new home after the sadness she has caused people. I really like that they point out that she is conflicted by these emotions, and I really like that the other antagonists think that she's just having a rough patch and she'll eventually return to them because they care for her also. It's a little bit weirder because they're still trying to be bad guys and take over this world, but they see the error of their ways eventually, and like they come around. They're cool, they're chill like that. But it's just really interesting and really nice to see the way the show handled Setsuna integrating into normal human society by having a family that cares for her. Like when they take her out for dinner, and they have Love's mom and dad talk to her and just be a normal family and appreciate that for her. And the fact that Love's mom eventually grows to see Setsuna as her own daughter also, and just kind of that whole dynamic. It's still a little bit found family, which PreCure does quite frequently and quite well a lot of the time. But it's very nice seeing that parental love extends to her as someone who did not think she would ever receive or was deserving of those kind of affections, which made for a really fun finale when she is part of them going to blow up the bad guys she was working for, because that was all she ever knew, because her world was one that was subsumed by labyrinth. And I really liked that the last part of the show showcased just the callousness of labyrinth. And while part of me hoped the main boss would be more than just a heartless monster who wants to control every world, the actual reason behind why the final boss was the way they are was much more interesting than it initially seemed. And I wish the literal robotic nature of Mobius was hinted at a little earlier in the show. I know at most of points in the show, the bad guys are using very sort of mechanical or robotic enemies for a lot of the time with their day-to-day monster of the week invasions, but we don't get a lot of hints at Mobius being the way he is until those last couple of episodes, where we then learn that Mobius is basically just an AI supercomputer made by an older other world humanity type civilization who didn't want to think for themselves anymore. And so they made an AI to do it for them. And then the AI followed his programming and decided, oh, okay, no, nobody needs to think anymore. I'll do it for you guys. Don't worry. Don't even sweat it. And then, goes a little megalomaniac crazy mode on them, as one tends to do when they are put in a position of absolute authority and then told to fulfill a vaguely defined task. Which is, it's a trope, but it's a fun one. And I genuinely liked how the show did it. And I liked that Mobius kind of taunted them and turned into each of them with projections or embodiments of each of them to lead them up through the buildings, and just the disregard for life that Mobius has in trying to kill his underlings to kill the PreCure. But I don't know. It was fun to see, and knowing Mobius is a big old computer program, and the cures are all named after kind of fruits. It gives it an interesting nature versus technology dynamic, which isn't really part of what the show is going for, but it kind of gets there a little bit anyway, with the idea of the AI just taking over humanity and going, you don't need to think anymore, I'm doing it for you, just obey me. It's definitely not the first show to do it, but I thought that it kind of did a decent job with it. I thought it was fun. I enjoyed Fresh Pretty Cure quite a bit. I think that the start was really strong. The middle part slowed down almost to a crawl at times. Maybe like the later parts than the middle. Maybe like right after the middle. The part kind of right after the middle. And then moving towards the end kind of started to drag, but not like a terrible amount, just a little bit. But then the end was really good. I had a lot of fun towards the end of the show. The Fresh Pretty Hero, I really enjoyed it. It was definitely an easier watch than I expected it to be, I guess. I don't know. I guess I'm not always sure what to expect going into these seasons. So that's part of the fun for me, is seeing kind of what's similar to previous seasons, what's different. And I enjoyed Fresh Pretty Cure. I think it is a very solid 8 out of 10.